Okay, hi, Alex Jones. You know that Civil War you're looking for? Well, here it is.
It's 4 July 2018, and it's the General Welfare Tendency coming at ya. So, it's the 4th of July. Glad to be with you. My name's Kevin McFoy Dunn. I'm a musician by trade. Don't have a poli-sci degree or a philosophy degree, but I'm a citizen, and I'm here to do what I can do, and you know what that is. So, in any case, let me tell you a little bit about general welfare. You will recognize it, of course, from the preamble to the Constitution. It's what my mama would call the red-headed stepchild of all the stated objectives of having a constitution in the first place, because it seems of everything that's in there, it's the thing that is just sort of taken as boilerplate. Which is a funny notion. There's a lot of boilerplate in the world, at least as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, but it means something different every time they come up with a decision. At least so it looks to me. I'm not a lawyer, although I do play one on the internet, at least a constitutional one. In any case, I'm a social democrat, and I don't make any secret of it, and I've said for years that anybody with Democrat in their party name should probably be a social democrat, and for the most part, most of them, particularly in the post-Scoop Jackson era, are social democrats, but it's the politics that dare not speak its name, because, well, heavens, someone in Montana might vote against you, because after all, they do have, 70 times the voting power of California, simply because they have 12 people living there and 2 whole senators? That's a problem. In any case, social democracy is what I'm about. And for a long time I considered that general welfare could be a party, a sort of contender in the sweepstakes to disassemble the duopoly. But then Trump came along, you know, him, he whom we cannot escape, and it began to look as if there wasn't much of a chance of breaking out of the duopoly entirely, or making any effort so to do, without severely endangering the prospects of getting the man out of office in 2020. So it occurred to me that the smart thing to do would at least be to give the Democratic Party sort of one last chance from the left. Other people have had this idea, I'm sure. This particular expression of it is actually very unlikely to be the one that carries the day in terms of getting that to accomplish. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is surely more apt, unless she joins me, to carry forward that sort of effort, but I had my little idea, so I think I'll go ahead. And let me just go ahead and describe what I have in mind. I would like to see 25, roughly, candidates for the Democrats' presidential nomination. You have to run in more than one state. You can't be a favorite child anymore. Not since the early 70s, if I'm not mistaken. So one candidate per 2 states, get on the ballot for the primary, accumulate whatever delegates can be got, and then on the first ballot at the convention, everybody, and it will be known that this is what the plan was originally. I don't know how the party rules work in context of that. I hope as this program develops over the months, I will get some feedback from viewers explaining to me how it works and why this idea is completely ridiculous. But as for now, hear me out. the 25 candidates accumulate as many delegates as they can, and on the first ballot, release them. They're free-range free-range delegates. They're off to do whatever they will. It's presumed that all of these will be social democrats, or at least awfully close to it, or socialists, or advocates of what I prefer to call social thought. I cannot remember who it was right now, and I'll look it up on my magic tablet machine here at some point, but it was suggested that the victor in New York 14 could, in the heartland, propose socialist solutions, provided, of course, it was ixnay on the socialists say thing. Don't say that word. I think that's a tactic of questionable morality, simply because it's hideously mendacious, but everybody knows what's up. So, and at some level, I do sort of agree with it. I think we would do better to refer to my label for it is social thought, and this is how that works. 4th of July, y'all, yay. The big argument for the entirety of the 20th century, certainly after the New Deal came in and the plutocrats set their faces against it, was collectivism, exemplified by big old bad Stalin, and individualism, represented by everybody with an assload of money. This is stupid. It's just fundamentally stupid. Human society is absolutely balanced between the individual and the collective. Circumstances from time to time may require a balance shifted somewhat one way or the other. Wartime's a good example, provided, of course, it's an existential war properly defined. We'll go into that later. But in peacetime, when there is lots of money, such as Piketty described, sloshing around unused, seems like a little less individualism might be required. And I know it just dawned on me that was actually marginally incoherent, because I seem to be calling for collectivism all the way around. But let me explain, or let me get myself out of the hole, take your pick. The object of social democratic individualism is collective provision that exalts, improves, ratifies the individual, insomuch as there's the strength of society lying therein. Conservatives aren't wrong about that, but then there's an issue about conservatism that I'd like to get into later in the program. At this stage of society, some individualisms are just practically not worth having. One of them, Buckley. Some of you will remember William F. Buckley once basically said it was his creed politically that he could buy himself the most beautiful natural feature on the planet and blow the damn thing up because it belonged to him. Now, if that's wrong, write in, tell me so, but I am pretty sure he, in a excess of an o altitudo, went ahead and said something of the sort. Very foolish it is, too. I'm sure the Taliban said something similar when they were blowing up the Buddhas at Bamiyan. Not natural features, but big enough. By the way, I have to fess up, full disclosure, this is Coca-Cola. So, sue me, the elixir of the South. It's really good. Anyway, That's a right that's just not worth having, except maybe on the books. I wish people would just give up the right to blow up the Grand Canyon if they felt like it. But apparently they won't. They also won't give up the right to immiserate and humiliate their fellow humans. Simply, well, for a variety of reasons. For their own good appears to be one of the dominant ones. So that things will be better someday. We'll all be rich. Just hang on and do what we say. I don't know. I don't know any particular reason why I should do what the fire sector wants me to do. I don't see any particular reason that I should be given $1 million for the refusal, unless MSNBC wants to give me a show. I'll need more stuff written on these pieces of paper than what I've got right now. The second hour is much more organized, trust me. But in any case, general welfare has a manifesto of sorts. It was thrown together in 5 minutes to largely amuse some very bright secondary school kids. But I can summarize the two principles pretty quickly. And this is what all of the general welfare tendency candidates would be signing on to for the Democratic race in 2020. I don't have the document right in front of me at the moment, but I can summarize them. I can certainly summarize the very first one, which is no member of the common species may be immiserated or humiliated through the government as an expression of society. Life is unfair. Humans are cruel. People will diss you. People will say bad things about you. People will not appreciate your work. Sometimes they'll appreciate your work too much. That's lucky for you. But you can't basically leave someone to sleep under the viaduct simply because they didn't want to go read your spreadsheet for the 5th time as their livelihood. You can't do it. It is unfair. It is indecent. It violates every principle in the great Israeli philosopher and social thinker Avishai Margaret's decent society. The floor beneath which no one can go has to be a reasonably comfortable one. Emma Rothschild, in Economic Sentiments, pointed out that Adam Smith, who her work has indicated very strongly, got massively misinterpreted and massively misappropriated initially through the best of intentions, i.e. some of his friends trying to keep him from being executed or imprisoned for radicalism. The man who wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments understood the moral dimension of capitalism better than he's generally given credit for, and one thing that's gotten way less attention than The Invisible Hand, which was a joke, incidentally, but it was the decent linen shirt. He pointed out that throughout time and history, social conditions, material conditions, philosophical conditions underpinning a society mutated such that he said that unlike in antiquity, a laborer could scarce go out without a decent linen shirt. He would not be considered for employment. That had to be got for him if he was to work. That was unlike the conditions among the Greeks and Romans, who admittedly had tunics, but still you could present yourself in a breechclout in 200 AD, and fine, go supervise those slaves moving the rocks. Here's your whip. And general welfare basically adheres to this notion as the policy objective. Now, when I was considering it as a party, my form for it was our principles are our policies. And what I mean by that is that, and this is why social thought figures into this, I don't care how people get a universal minimum income, a roof over their heads, the opportunity for they themselves or their children to get a decent education, the ability to go to the doctor. I don't care how it happens. If capitalism wants to sign a binding compact involving the entire imprisonment of the fire sector if they don't deliver on it, that's fine. If the whole society peacefully votes to collectivize everything, that's fine, although pretty ridiculous. I think we've seen how that works. Any intermediate condition. Lincoln said something similar about the Union and slavery. He said, if I could save the Union by freeing some of the slaves and leaving some of them in bondage, I would do it. If I could save the Union by freeing them all, I would do it. If I could save the Union by leaving them all in bondage, I would do it. But my object is to save the Union. My object is to accomplish the standard goals of social democracy, and in the fullest way possible, in time. But there has to be movement toward it. Bill Clinton. Let us talk about Bill Clinton. I don't like Bill Clinton. I stood in a football field in Decatur, Georgia in 1992 and jumped up and down actually to Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow, because he wasn't George H.W. Bush, whom I considered possibly the worst patrician nightmare of a president imaginable. And by the time his term was over, and the Lewinsky thing figures into it more to me now than it did at the time. But that wasn't what drove it. The Sister Soldier business, that was nice. The worst thing he ever did actually only came to fruition, I believe it would have been something on the order of as little as 18 months ago, maybe not even that long. He and John Kasich, that's a name you hear a lot when people bring up the concept of the reasonable Republican. They collaborated on a little time bomb on food stamps. Basically, they sundowned them. I was like, well, okay, sometime in 2016 or so, we're going to kind of pretty much reduce it to nothing. That was Bill Clinton. That's a certain strain in the Democratic Party. You saw it in Nancy Pelosi the other day when she got all sniffy about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Like, yeah, that's one little district. I don't care, basically. Ben Mathis Lilly at Slate had some funny things to say about that, particularly about the little imagining of her saying that thundering of hundreds of thousands of hooves over the horizon was probably nothing. But the temporizing of the Democratic Party over any number of issues has been a dispiriting spectacle at best and a nauseating one at worst. I get emails all the time from Tom Perez and the DCCC just is relentless. I'd say they want me to give them money. Haha, that's pretty funny. If I hadn't gotten money off my GoFundMe account, you wouldn't be looking at me right now. I don't know that it's any bargain that you are, but God bless you. You're looking at me now or later. So apparently they. Oh yeah, what was it? Perez, Kevin. It's always very personal. Kevin, you haven't given yet this year. Ah, okay. So the party rank and file, whereof I'm not registered as Democrat in Georgia because I've been disgusted with the party for so long. Although I plan to love it more soon. You know what? Okay, give you money. That's cute. Now, I guess that's a modus of party discipline. So, what are you doing about that Manchin guy in West Virginia? Do you suppose he's going to vote for the cult member when Trump picks her? Or the guy in Indiana, I can't even remember his name. Joe something. Joe, it figures. Joe the senator. And Heidi Heitkamp. She's a cute one. I like her. She and Jody What's-Her-Face with the castration tools should get together and have a hoedown or something. Anyway, so hey, there's your confused Democratic Party. Republicans, they're pretty much a totalitarian organization at this stage of things. Terrified of white supremacists, terrified of their mega ultra-trillionaire donors. They don't get out of line. If they do, they resign. Jeff Flake, they aptly named Jeff Flake. It's like, It's like, my paradigm for it is when Vicente Fox finished up his term as president in Mexico and basically promptly came, hey, you know, that drug problem we've got, we should probably just legalize drugs. Then it will go away. I could say that. I'm not president anymore. Jeff Flake, same deal. All the rest of them that have run like rabbits. I'll give them credit for having something approximating a conscience, but still, they are not to be lauded. Certainly not the way that many media outlets like MSNBC are inclined to do. Charlie Pierce at Esquire is very good on this. I think he once referred to them as a sort of the second chance employment fair for never-Trumpers, whatever that means. At this stage of things, never-Trumpers, many of them have just stopped being Republicans. I don't know what they think they are. This is one of the objects, as a matter of fact, of the general welfare tendency within the Democratic Party, is to force the issue, possibly to the point where the party has to fissure, finally. The tent is too big. The policy issues are too all over the map. Government by spreadsheet, or the very, very determined promotion of Nancy Pelosi as a legislative genius. I'm sure she's a legislative genius in the context of 1994 or even 2004, back when there were Democratic majorities in at least one of the chambers. That's gone. What she knows how to do is, at this stage of things, effectively irrelevant. There is, and hat tip, hat tip, to Mr. Jones for saying there was going to be a civil war today, because I don't think there's going to be a shooting war today, but I think a lot of people are sitting in their various holiday venues shooting stuff off, some of which explodes, and some of which is fireworks. No, what? Well, anyway, I meant mouths. That was my little joke, but I didn't finish it. Just wondering what the hell's the matter with the Republic and what they can do about it. Now, I know a good bit of this is going on the other side. As a matter of fact, we're going to have a little chat about the mind of the other side here. Just a little bit. But, yeah. The Civil War I'm interested in is the one inside the Democratic Party. Andrew O'Hare at Salon has written extensively about this. Plenty of other people have too. It can't keep on like this. General welfare, the general welfare tendency, has two objectives with respect to the Democratic Party: either take it over, or at least, at minimum, powerfully inflect it and stiffen its spine in terms of the notion of collective provision and the duty of every citizen to every other citizen, or destroy it. Either way, I don't much care myself. Wiser heads might care to counsel me otherwise, but we're here because at every juncture where spines needed to be stiffened, the Democrats, to use Abba Eban's formulation about the Palestinians, never failed to fail. That's different words, but you get the point. They never neglected to do a half measure when a full measure was possible. They got so spooked after the backlash of 68 to 65 that they, in some senses, they never recovered. Carter, what to say about Carter? Carter meant better than he was able to do in some ways, but in some ways he was very credulous. He bought the deregulation story, which may have been of some utility had it been rolled out a little more slowly and with a little more attention to the various sorts of damages it would do to the industry generally, and to various aspects of the safety and convenience of air travel. No, one thing, just among many. Clinton, as noted, was basically a pusillanimous sot interested in mostly looking good, I think. Did he have decent principles? I'm not entirely sure anymore. I know he killed a mentally challenged man so he could be president. And speaking of Clintons, I know that his wife voted for that resolution back in 2002, knowing perfectly well, and in saying this, I'm giving her credit for being an intelligent human being. She knew perfectly well that it was codswallop. The lot of it wasn't true. But she needed to be in the Senate in just the right sort of rough and tough American exceptionalism mode so she could be president someday. So there are your Clintons. And then there is the lamented Obama, who I think will be viewed as one of the real tragic figures of American political life. I have not a scintilla of doubt that he believed everything he said initially, and on into the debacle, about comity and trying to come together. How he persisted in it, except out of hubris, is beyond me. I don't know. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the post-Watergate Democratic presidential record. And most people wanted those people to be president. Most people wanted to see at least an improvement in their security. Just their basic security with respect to fundamental human needs. To have enough money to just live decently at the minimum. To go to the doctor. To get their teeth fixed. There's not a system in the Republic at the moment that makes it possible for you to get your teeth fixed rationally. And believe me, I got a few holes in my mouth that are testimony to that. To obtain training and to obtain schooling both for oneself and for one's children. The whole roster of public goods. That's just a given. No matter how conservative the party in charge in Europe is, they just go ahead and do that. I don't know how much longer they're going to be doing that. Because racism, a topic we will get to here and on. But how much longer can this go on? Are we going to go around the block again? Is Kristen Gillibrand going to save us? Is Cory Booker going to save us? Eric Holder, maybe. How about him? He looks good. A lot of them look good. There are plenty of them who have all kinds of lovely sentiments. But this is where I come back, if I can. And next week, God is my judge and the creek don't drown me. There'll be better graphics all the way around so I can just show you these things. But oh, and General Welfare Tendency has its own Facebook page. You can see the manifesto there in all its glory. Recommend you go check that out. It will also link you to our GoFundMe page, which will help us get better graphics and good stuff of the sort. But again, the manifesto is about that one principle chiefly. There is another principle, and I've had discussions with people, and it has been suggested to me by wise heads, old and young, that it's a supernumerary principle because the first one supersedes it simply by saying that everybody is entitled. Yes, entitled. Let me say that again. Alex, if you're listening, listen. Entitled. Yes, you are. A human is entitled to this little moiety of stuff just by reason of being a living, breathing, sentient human. Some of that gets talked about in the second hour also. God forgive me, it's a holiday. Oh, incidentally, let me just interrupt myself and tell you, this is ordinarily intended to be a 3-hour show. The future will be an hour of me more or less running my mouth with cute graphics and various little prompts about what I should talk about. I may have got some even now on my phone, but I'm too nervous to look at it. The second hour will be the interview hour, I hope. I hope to be getting some sympathetic names, maybe not the biggest ones, but certainly people with some large ideas. I have a list. And then the third hour will be sort of the Skyping hour, the Skyping and sniping hour, where people will call up and tell me what a moron I am. And I'm an American, so I'll at least half deserve it. But anyway, right now I don't have that, and that explains why there's a good bit of and ah and ooh, and I just am amazed that I even managed to get on the air today. Not that this is air, but you know what I mean. So, let me try to backtrack to where I was, since, as remarked, my first hour notes are practically non-existent. Oh, by the way, let me check with Jimmy for a second. At about the 55-minute mark, can we loop the intro graphic for about 5 minutes? Thank you, Vitold. Have a huge crew back there. Anyways, that's the way the show will work. Now, where was I? The party. Was it Ed Kilgore? I think so. Ed Kilgore in Daily Intelligencer today was pointing out that the Republicans, ever since Bush, really haven't done policy. It's all politics in its bad sense, although everybody who knows me knows that I have said a million times over, you don't like politics, move out of the polis. Go live in the wilderness. You know, if you will not pay your club, as Franklin had it in his excellent letter to Morris. I'll put that URL up for everybody sometime soon. I think you can probably find it on the General Welfare Tendency page. It just take off. Go live someplace deep in the woods where the black flies roam, or any other number of possible places where you will have no human society. Then you can, like, not contribute to it in any way. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that the Republicans have had no policy to speak of since Bush, and it's not surprising. They loathe government. They put people into the chambers. Like, I found out today, Jim Jordan, who incidentally appears to be embroiled in some sort of wrestling team sex scandal. Apparently he's like a collegiate assistant wrestling coach, or was, until he decided to go into the Congress. What were his qualifications? I was looking at that guy. The first time I ever noticed him, I said, my God, where did this man come from? How is it that this creature is sitting in a chamber with such august figures as Steve King? Oh, wait. I didn't say that exactly. Actually, I knew, because Steve King was there. Horrific, but true. But, again, they don't care about policy. The district I live in is represented by a horribly bigoted preacher. Something of the Huckabee mode, I suppose, except even more ignorant, which would take some doing. Funny story, I put this on my Facebook page the other day. I used to work for a Hooks and Bullets publishing house as a copy editor. I turned myself into a line editor. They didn't appreciate it, but they were confused enough to where they kept me around for 12 and a half years, which was good. I managed to go bankrupt twice. Well, second time after they laid me off. But in any case, I edited Many Estate magazine, and it might have been Arkansas when Mike was the governor. He was addressing the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, or some hunting organization, sportsmen they call themselves. And Mikey retailed an anecdote about how he was up there on the ridge, just looking at that pronghorn. So I guess it wasn't the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Anyway, hunters, who really cares? And he got a bead on it, and he could just feel that angel pick that bullet up and take it right to that pronghorn. He said that. Man was the governor of a state. He had responsibility for a budget, scraping around, around $1 billion a year, I guess. Somewhere in the ballpark. A governor. I'm an Episcopalian, but I'm, let's say, a strict separationist. I believe very strongly that you don't go into the assembly of this world with the arguments of the next or the other. You can have all of those you want when you are not in the people's assembly. But when you get there, when you get into a place representing Muslims, representing Christians of 50 different stripes, all the way from Westboro Baptist to me and Saint Avalokiteshvara, you leave it at the door. It's all undecidable. It's all unfalsifiable. It's all in the line, again quoting Franklin, who once said, all disputes among divines may be abridged thus: it is so, it is not so, it is so, it is not so, it is so, it is not so. That's it. You can't get any work done of any meaningful sort, of the work of the here and the now, if your goal is beyond while you're sitting in the place of the here and now. It's an apposite. So it's Mike Huckabee. He ran a state, and they're just as bad out there now, if not worse, I'm fairly sure. Against this fervor of diminished intellect, the Democrats by and large offer good feelings. They don't want that ideology word coming up, because that would suggest they're inflexible and not in touch with the people and not concerned with their daily lives, to have some idea about why they shouldn't be left to sleep under the viaduct. So they content themselves with government, as I may have earlier remarked, by spreadsheet. Here's how we write the grant, and no compelling reason offered beyond, because it's the right thing to do. Is it? Is it the right thing to do? Go ask Jim Jordan. He'll pin you. He will. I saw him yelling at Rod Rosenstein the other day. By God, I'm surprised he didn't just come over there, now that I know what I know about him, and just put him in a headlock. Ugh. Sorry, some more, evil multinational juice. Gotta do it. Me and little Marco. Anyway. So, yeah. So, there are your two polls. One, I don't want to say they're bloodless, but they're gormless. The Democrats are so scared of taking a position, not least because of their donors, but just congenitally. Again, 65 led to 68. And instead of letting that stiffen their spines, they sort of whiffed. Now, there are reasons for that. The war was on. That war. The first incredibly stupid and pointless war. Some of that will come up with the Jesus stuff later, too. But, in any case, there's your Democrats just trying to play both ends against the middle and still get the product of good human feeling as they see it effectuated. They want everybody to have a good job, and let's see, well, what was the Clinton phrase? Everybody who works hard and plays by the rules. Now, it has been objected any number of times, and who wrote the rules? It appears it's the fire sector, mostly, and all of their adjuncts, like doctors, who used to sort of be disinterested healers, but now are going along with the general unbridled capitalist program, and in their hearts, not in their statements, not in their imaginings, to themselves, I suppose, but in practice, treating the health of their patients as an epiphenomenon of their capital accumulation. I know they don't believe that's what they're doing. I think there's even some substantial number of them, even conservative ones, that might do better if they weren't locked into tropes like algorithm. Algorithm. Have you ever heard anyone else use that phrase? I bet you haven't. Term, not phrase, term. Basically, Horatio Alger. Bootstrap thought. I refer to it as algorithm. Anyway, I'm sure those doctors, mean well, but they've sort of been roped into the mechanism of viewing their practices, and again, not all. There's many a doctor in this world that struggles to get health care to those least able to provide it for themselves. But do they get any help beyond charity, unreliable, capricious, will-o'-the-wisp charity, here today, gone tomorrow, much of it floating into the void of administrative costs? Do they? Is that the way to get people to the doctor? I don't think so. So work hard and play by the rules. Work hard. A little later, I'll be reading you something that, among other things, contains encomiums to the terrible hard work of CEOs. And it's from somebody who, on the face of it, should have a real respect for actual hard ergs expended work. But somehow or other, as is so often the case, ideology simply blinds this person to the social reality of the trope that basically has turned him into a monster. And we will go with that little story in 5. I wanted you to loot that thing.
I put it on.
Oh, okay. So, good. Yeah, just loot for the... Just keep putting it. Okay. Oh, boy. Well, that was rough. Oh, okay. Left or right? Oh, okay. So, okay. Does he have a bunch of an audience? Oh, really? And I'm no worse than him? Oh, excellent. Oh, I just gotta stop. I mean to program more breaks into this thing. We've been gone. Maybe you've been listening to us. We don't know. We haven't quite got the audio worked out yet. Hey, we're amateurs. We're trying to save the Republic here. Let me start the hour just reminding everybody who has been listening and fallen asleep as a result of my drone, and possibly lost the plot, about what the chief object of this little exercise is. I want to send 25 regional presidential candidates to the 2020 Democratic Convention with a bunch of delegates under their belts, all of which will be released into the wild on the first ballot, among other things, as a counter to the superdelegates. Now, again, I'm not a party theoretician, so if someone would like to enlighten me next week when we're able to take calls in the third segment, which segment we will not have today, I would love that. But insofar as I understand the party rules now, you can be a candidate for the nomination if you are in nomination or you're on the ballot for at least 2 states. The superdelegates, I'm not sure it was ever a good idea, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that at some point it served a useful function in terms of increasing the diversity of representation inside the party. The last election demonstrated that, party rules or no, and I know there was a lot of kvetching to the effect that, oh, well, you knew how things worked, so don't get mad at Wasserman Schultz because, or Brazil or whoever was implicated in this, just absolute explosion over the whole Sanders candidacy and the party's efforts to stop it. You knew that's how it worked, so don't say that the nomination was stolen. Fair enough. Fair enough. Even without the superdelegates, if memory serves, Sanders was not going to win. But is still in all, at this stage of things, it does simply seem that there isn't any function served to ratify the decisions of hierarchy prior to the convention. I want a brokered convention, but not in a smoke-filled room. Well, it depends on what the smoke is. You know what I mean? No, seriously. Well, maybe not seriously. But there should be discussion on the floor. None of these proposed candidates, Harris, Holder, Gillibrand, maybe they could draft Vermin Supreme, I don't know, but none of them should get a pass just on delegates, just on the floor. The nomination should be denied anybody who doesn't come to the left with a real promise of a principled approach to public goods and an unashamed acknowledgement that what we're all talking about, however circumlocutively, is entitlement. Again, you're human, you're within the borders of the United States of America, within its jurisdiction, you get stuff. The getting of stuff for you will mean the getting of stuff by others because of your economic activity within the polis. Economic activity and political activity are little distinguished in many ways. Never forget, what we call economics was once, in the age of Smith and Ricardo and their ilk, it was called political economy. It was the household of the city, as it were. You know, polis oikos. Ecumenical is related, incidentally, for those of you keeping score at home. Their feet have to be held to the fire. They have to be made to acknowledge they know. I think they know. But they need to understand better that there is a serious social democratic social thought, democratic socialist strain of thought in the party, it's growing, and it's growing partially because of young people who are coming on stream, and less so, but the category that needs to enlarge most, those voters sentient enough to vote, but cynical enough as a function of their intelligence to not do it. My calculations have it at 100 million people not exercising the franchise. That's excluding the maximum imaginable number who were excluded by reason of ineligibility of one sort and another, felons who've had the franchise removed from them, etc., etc. There's at least 100 million people just can't be arsed to do it. 15 million of those have to be turned. It's the only number I'm comfortable with that can overcome the current gerrymandering nightmare that Rove and DeLay bequeathed us. Good job, boys, too. I gotta say, excellent work. You basically ruined the political process for, I would say 2022 is the first opportunity to correct this districting nightmare, and I don't know if it can be corrected then, because herd mentality being what it is, a number of the indifferent will have been moved by the loudest guy on the block at the barbecue to become supply-siders, because, I don't know, we'll show him a beefcake picture of Larry Kudlow or something. I just... But, get better, Larry. Anyway. That's the plan. As time goes on, as guests appear, as arguments are had, and other developments come on stream and the show, I hope to give you more detail about this, but again, general welfare says it all. It's, as I said earlier, the red-headed stepchild of the Constitution's preamble. All the things that are to be attended to, the last thing in the queue is the general welfare of the people. Now, I know it's disputable. The supply-sider says we'll all be richer if you let the rich be rich first. If you let them dispose of their capital however they like, up to and including buying the minds of the inattentive with saturation bombardment of their worst impulses. And nobody ever lost a dime by appealing to the lowest common denominator, and that's what the Republican Party has been doing since the Southern Strategy in '68. It's what it's been doing since the dumb guy wave of 1980 when Reagan came in. Reagan, the sainted Reagan. The silly Reagan. But, and I don't mean that in the old Anglo-Saxon sense either. Anyway, that's the whole point of this party. This clam bake. A party eventually. A party if you can keep it. What we need someday is we need a sort of lumpen party of the confused and anxious, sort of the worried big bears of men that Clifford Odets spoke of in the screenplay to Clash by Night. The people who basically don't have any ideas. They have ideas of a quantificationist or empirical sort about their jobs, but when it comes to society, the philosophies underpinning society, at best they have a theology, and at worst they have Ayn Rand. who's a species of theology, of truly, truly, demonology. Let's say that. Split the difference. It's still supernatural. There should be a plurality party that's that center party. Pete Peterson's wet dream, God rest his soul. But, and then a left party and a right party. And my theory, this is my theory, just my little theory, the worried, bare, responsible center party will have to treat with the left, because in this country at least, the left's not insane. You may not like what the left says, you may not like their sartorial turnout, maybe you wish they didn't have quite so many drum circles. I kind of wish they wouldn't have so many drum circles. I don't know if they need to go all the way to Clean for Gene. Look it up. 68. Okay. Right arm. But they're not nuts. And it depends. If you're a hardcore conservative, and I've got the testament of one of them right here, and he'd think they're nuts, guaranteed. Although he would defend to the death their right to be nuts, which is nice. I appreciate that. But the center party can't talk meaningfully to the people they're admittedly socially and culturally closer to, simply because they still sort of have consciences. Now, I've said this before. There's a block of 50 million white Americans who have taken leave of their senses. They are quite mad now. Some of them are evilly mad, some of them are pathetically mad, but they're just deranged. They voted for Donald Trump to be president. Donald Trump, a man known on the eve of the election for 3 decades and change to be the nearest no-count human being ever. The man who sat and said, "You're fired," because Mark Burnett told him to. A man who should be, by all reasonable business person, fire sector person calculations, worth about 5 times what he is, assuming the lowball of what he's worth is true. A man who stank up the airwaves every time he appeared since 1985 and some. They elected him president. It's enough to give me the vapors. So anyway, the Democratic Party, Pelosi, is a good example of this. Still just sort of sticking with the old, well, you know, if we address their economic anxieties, Charlie Pierce is good on this, then we can bring them back around. They won't think that we're just so out there somehow. It's like they are gone. They have drifted away. They're like the leaf in the image of Mano no Aware. They are no more. They're pushing up daisies with respect to any sort of reasonable social thought. They've lost the ability. They can sort of think about it in terms of their property taxes, and it mostly comes down to, I don't want to pay them. And, well, you know, this is where you start to hear, those somebody else's kids. You know, why don't they just pay for it themselves? On and on and on and on. Anyway, I think that the lumpen center party is probably still possessed of enough of a conscience. Hardcore never Trumpers, I think there are some left. They're the people who should go there. Steve Schmidt, he should go there. He seems like a reasonable person who unfortunately is affected by that algorithm I was talking about. And he still imagines bootstrapism to be a thing. Still fancies that people in the economic sphere control their destinies, that there's no precedent condition, really. And if everyone's just given a fair shake, that'll be fine. Now, in fairness, Steve doesn't seem to be a bigot. Steve doesn't seem to be... At least he's... If he could be made to be aware of the extent to which that he has, let's say, hidden racialist predispositions, I think he'd probably try to correct it. I can say the same of Nicole Wallace, the full employment program for former Bush administration officials at MSNBC. She's a good example of it. These are the people who would be in this plurality center party. They couldn't get anything done without one of the wings. And there's nothing that says for sure that they wouldn't go to the right to accomplish their ends, but I'm betting they'd go left. I'm betting the left would find ways to get things expressed to them. Again, as Ed Kilgore suggested in the context of the winter in New York 14, just propose the programs and don't use that word. And maybe that's a good idea. But I still think some theory about humans needs to be adduced. After all, this is the 4th of July. What happened on the 4th of July? Well, in 1776, among other things, a lot of the founding fathers implicitly obtained the right to sell all that property they had acquired outside the bounds of the colony as constituted by the crown. I wish I could remember the author's name. Again, a bunch of the notes I was supposed to make, I didn't make. But a book called American Revolutions that came out recently made a very strong case that, yeah, it was pretty convenient that they discovered the rights of man in so forceful a way because they had a bunch of real estate investment riding on it. So, I guess Trump's not that anomalous in a lot of ways. In any case, this whole little exercise from this ill-shapen, needing a bear mama to lick it into some kind of form, business right here is to further the enterprise of making some party, the Democratic Party or a new one, I don't much care, as I've said before, any way possible, by any means possible, to be social democratic, to get in line with the rest of the industrialized world, to look after people first. Oh yeah, and incidentally, to get rid of expeditionary warfare, which is one reason we have the bloated military we do. We need about half the size that we've got now in terms of military. I don't even want to go into it too much because I'll start spluttering. But we exist right now mostly to defend the supply lines of plutocrats. Excuse me for coughing, but I'm in a basement. Anyway, in the matter of expeditionary warfare, by and large, the Kuwait shoot vaguely otherwise, because they sort of asked for help, which is not quite like a treaty obligation, but bears some resemblances there too. But there hasn't been a good shoot since... Years ago I would have said since World War II, but I have sort of included Korea of late, if only because I've developed a real fondness for Korean culture. I watch Saguk like they're going out of style. It's, I can tell you everything you want to know about Chosun. Which, incidentally, is what they still call the Juche regime up in the north. They still call it Chosun, which was the name, like China, Korea's dynasties named the country. The Koryo dynasty which gave Korea the name we know it by, was in charge before Chosun took over. And anyway, so I'm almost inclined to find that a good shoot now. But nothing after that. Not a thing. And this brings me to this interesting document. I pay attention to Quora and am much taxed for it by many because it's full of trolls. Some straight up Russians. Some people I suspect of being Russians, not least because of their incredibly unreliable use of articles. Russian has no articles, as you probably know, and you can frequently spot a pretty good but not perfect Russian writing by a sudden just breakdown in the use of articles. Quora has its share. There are a lot of things to like about Quora. The physics tyro has much to browse around in. There's some pretty good commenters on AI. A fellow by David Pierce I keep up with is an AI skeptic from the standpoint of whether a truly sapient creature will ever be generated by human technology. He's bearish on that, as am I, etc. There are a number of good things to say about it, but it is just the playground for windy right-wingers, and I get an email every day, a couple of times sometimes, with topics that my reading on the site has indicated I'm into. And so this was the question one person asked. It sounds like a leading question, shall we say. Do conservatives actually want to live under an authoritarian dictatorship as opposed to a federal republic operating as a representative democracy? That sounds a little bit like a middle school kid threw together some words that are political, and I don't know exactly what object there was. It might be innocent, for all I know. It actually sounds sort of fishy to me. And this ex-Marine answered him. I'm not going to give the guy's name, because I don't want to give him any publicity beyond what somebody who might want to trace this down, if they even see it, and figure out who he is. It might be easy enough to do. I don't know. It was. I'll say this. It was. The answer was given. For those of you who like detective work, the answer was given last Friday, which I guess would have been the, I want to say 29th? Was that Friday, Jimmy? Marvin? Sammy? Oh, look. Excuse me, okay, I'm just going to look at the damn phone. Oh, it was. Okay, yeah. So, you can look it up yourself. This is July the 4th, and it's a Wednesday. So, to this question on Quora, do conservatives actually want to live under an authoritarian dictatorship as opposed to a federal republic operating as a representative democracy? This ex-Marine, who, to all appearances, is really, really working on getting a syndicated column out of life, wrote this big old long thing. I'm now going to read it to you, and then we'll go back through it. The purpose of this exercise is, in some sense, just knowing your enemy. We all have imaginings about our fellows, about their inflectability, their amenability to reason, Um, whether they're actually listening, even to themselves. This is a guy about whom I can reasonably confidently say there's no moving this bohunk. I mean, he just can't. He just cannot see it. Chapter and verse. Everything you fear is in here. And I checked out his site. If he's like doing a Team America deal or something for comedy value or something, he's really good, because his consistency is depressingly absolute. Nothing changes. He threatens violence in a kind of an abstract way. He is, as you will see, a Second Amendment absolutist. But here we go. Here's ex-Marine telling us whether conservatives really want to live in an authoritarian dictatorship. So many answers here that lack any understanding of what conservatives believe. No, we do not want authoritarian dictatorship. Quite the opposite. We mostly want to be left alone. We don't want government in our lives at all, or at least as little as possible. Let's look at some things that conservatives actually believe, and then determine whether or not these could be considered authoritarian. Incidentally, he uses a British period, puts it outside the quotation marks. You ever notice that? You're not a copy editor, of course you wouldn't. Anyway, we believe in free speech. That means for everyone, not just us. If you hold views that we may find repugnant, including neo-Nazis, communists, and any other actual authoritarian positions, we believe that you should have every right to state those beliefs. Free speech also means freedom from compelled speech. Nobody should be forced to take any position they do not believe in, nor to subsidize positions they do not believe in. The worst enemy of the lie is not the censor, it is the truth. There's the future newspaper columnist speaking sententiously, he said politely. Anyway, to continue. Conservatives believe that ideas should be a marketplace, and that the best ones, backed by the best arguments, ought to be left to prevail. We believe in freedom of religion. This means both the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. Nobody is trying to impose their religious beliefs on anyone else through law. Sorry. Yeah, that's what he said. The left often likes to claim so, but these are invariably straw man arguments. Ooh, yes, wicker man arguments indeed, I should say. Sorry. I was going to say something I regret. Possibly actionable. We don't want to impose religious law on anyone, nor do we accept laws that interfere with the practice of religion. It is not just evangelical Christians who believe this either. I am not a religious man. I was baptized as a Catholic and consider myself a Catholic, but I am not a churchgoer, and I disagree with the church on plenty of issues, especially with the current Pope. But that's a whole different issue. You talk about separation of church and state? Fine. That goes both ways. I'll have a lot to say about that later. We believe in free markets. The government should stay out of the economy because they're not very good at meddling in it. Let the market work itself out. No picking winners and losers, no subsidies, no bailouts, and minimal regulation. Capitalism is the best economic system ever devised, and it works best with minimal interference from the state. I'm sorry, I'm putting my thumb on the scale with my sticking my tongue out and stuff. Lo siento. We believe in the sanctity of life, and that includes for the unborn. I'm sorry, I gotta break in here right here and say, yeah? Where's the capital punishment sanctity of life exception here? I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. Oh, don't see it. Oh, it's all about abortion. Even though the clause says We believe in the sanctity of life, and that includes for the unborn, but apparently not for people who, killed somebody. Because, well, I guess, they're already dead because they took life. Or something. What? I'm sorry, I did not mean to start criticizing the guy. Now, let me finish. Here I go. The scientific evidence that life begins before birth is quite compelling. Personally, I do not claim to know the exact moment that life begins. Science does not have that answer yet, but I do know that passing through the birth canal does not magically imbue life onto... You need to work on that if you're going to be in newspaper world, buddy. Does not magically imbue life onto a previously lifeless body. Protecting the sanctity of life is paramount. A nation that does not do this loses moral high ground. This is why we do not believe in abortion. It has nothing to do with the rights of the mother. We believe that she has rights as everyone does. It has to do with the rights of the child she is carrying inside of her. Moving on. Speaking of rights in general, our concept of rights is as laid out in the Bill of Rights. We believe in negative rights, which is to say, things that the government is prevented from doing. For example, free speech is a negative right. Isaiah Berlin would be thrilled by all this, I'm sure. Government cannot regulate speech. We do not generally believe in positive rights, things that government is obligated to give us. Our theory of rights is that they are natural. They are inherent to all of us as human beings. Positive rights we generally see as bread and circuses. Why don't you just say panem et circenses and be done with it? Gifts from government meant to pacify the citizenry, and we are wary of them. The one exception, the one positive right that and I would imagine most conservatives find acceptable is the right to an attorney. When the state has filed adversarial legal action against an individual, we have no problem with that individual having guaranteed legal representation. This is to present authoritarianism. We do not want to see arbitrary and capricious kangaroo courts, locking people away for nothing. Lock her up! Lock her... Sorry. Mein Führer, I can walk. We believe in individual responsibility. People are responsible for their own actions and should reap the rewards or suffer the consequences of those actions. The CEO who has worked his ass off to get where he is, we say he advisedly, where he has been, yes, worked to get where he is, and is compensated quite handsomely for it, like, 1,500 times the average paid guy on the floor, should not be required to fork over a large percent of his salary to subsidize the lifestyle of the high school dropout whose only ambition in life is to smoke marijuana every day. And personally, I take about 10 million of those guys compared to the guys that are, Scott Pruitt's actual employers, but I digress. We believe in the right keep and bear arms. You want to talk about authoritarianism? And instantly, this is hilarious. This guy's a Marine. He's a Marine. Have you ever seen what Marines, a given individual Marine, has on his body for assault stuff? He could kill an entire local SWAT team, no matter how militarized they are. Anyway, let's continue with that. I will come back to that. You want to talk about authoritarianism? We believe that an armed man is a free citizen and an unarmed man is a subject. Our country was born when an authoritarian government overstepped its bounds, and armed citizens who had very lucrative real estate contracts in prospect resisted and cast off the yoke of the British Crown. We remember that lesson and are not so naive as to think it could never happen again. Memo: I don't think the British are coming, but be that as it may. Let's see. Yes, here we go. We believe that liberty rests on 4 boxes: the soap box, the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. That is to say, in case you didn't get it, free speech, free and fair elections, an impartial court, and trial by a jury of our peers, and finally, the right to own weapons of contemporary military utility. Oh, goody! I want a fighter. Anyway, we believe that gun rights are the last resort, ultimate check on tyranny. What? I don't even remember that sentence. I suppose last resort should have a hyphen. The last resort, ultimate check on tyranny. Maybe a comma. But then you'd need another article. Be that as it may, I'm not this guy's line editor. And we will not give them up because people who don't understand guns fear them. Hey, look, Pinhead. Look, here's a story. I understand guns. You pull the trigger and a pin depresses and, like, something explodes and a piece of lead comes out of the jacket. And if you have a fully automatic weapon, the accumulated gas discharge advances the round and you can keep doing it. If you have a semi-automatic weapon, well, maybe you get a bump stock. I don't know. Whatever. I understand guns. This guy. A Marine! Let me just interpose here. It's like... God. This man was in a... If he was in a war, if he wasn't just some guy sitting back stateside training poor, sad little grunts from Ames, Iowa, to go shoot at Muslims or Vietnamese, or whoever didn't deserve it, then he fought in a bad war. They were all bad wars. Thank you for your service. If you happen to be watching this and you were in service, thank you for your service. But also, thanks for nothing. You were involved in expeditionary warfare that served no purpose except maybe to get somebody elected, maybe to stoke xenophobia, maybe to try to assuage the PTSD of a nation that could not absorb the fact that they had created such a toxic situation in one region of the world that they were hated that much. There hasn't been a good shoot since Korea. Okay? So this guy, little Mr. Guns here, if he fired a round at anybody that was an enemy, he shouldn't have. Alright. Ah, God. I had no idea I would get this worked up. So, we believe in free and fair elections. One man, one vote. One man, one vote. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy's actually in Quiverful or something, or at least fond of it. We believe that government should not be involved in funding campaigns, and that anyone who wants to contribute to a candidate or cause of their choice should have no limits in how they want to do this, as long as it doesn't involve hurting anyone, stealing from them, or compelling anyone to do or say something. Oh, property is theft. Just in the matter of stealing. We believe in assuring that these elections... Which ones? These elections? Apparently not the presidential one. Are free and fair. Now, we believe in assuring that these elections... Oh, I see. This is, like, screwed up. We believe in assuring that these elections are free and fair is of paramount importance. Well, you get the idea. The reader will understand, as they said back at Game and Fish. Anyway... We believe in a strong defense. The world is a large place. Oh my, isn't it? Not quite, 70 light years radially, but large. And we're a large country. Yes, aren't we just? Because we are a large country with global influence, we're bound to have enemies. Since we will have enemies, it is best to have a military as overwhelmingly powerful as possible. You threaten Americans, you should wake up with an aircraft carrier parked off your coast. You should be so lucky. You harm Americans, you wake up, if you ever wake up, with Marines kicking down your door. Although you might not be the right door, but whatever. Yes, we have enemies, and it's better to fight them in their own backyard than in our own. Yeah! Go right over there to their backyard. We believe in borders. A nation must have control of who enters it. Without borders, the very concept of a nation is utterly meaningless. We'll talk about meaninglessness later. This is our country, all of ours, as Americans, regardless of our political views. Yeah, it's mine too. Thanks. Who gets to come here should be up to us, not up to someone who just wants to be here, has nothing to offer, and wants only to abuse our generosity, which, you know, has got to be most of them, right? Don't you think? Don't you think? We believe... Oh, this, I love this. This is choice. This from a guy who basically, apart from a 10th grade civics class, circa 1963, is a moron. We believe in Western culture and traditions. Western culture works. There is a reason that Western nations are among the most developed in the world, and that those non-Western ones that compete with us, such as Japan, are heavily Westernized. Have you met Japan? Anyway, we were against tossing out whole millennia. That's 1,000 years of Western culture for the latest fashion. Sure. Yeah, we're I don't know. We're all for that Chinese guy who burned the books back in the 3rd century BC, right? Whatever. There is almost never any compelling reason to do so. I find it interesting he says almost never. We believe in American exceptionalism. Ooh, he said it. He went there. America is an idea, and an excellent one. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are among the best documents ever written by human hands. Ever. Right up there with general and special relativity. America is an idea that anyone can be whoever they want to be. Forgot the be. Limited only by their own ability. We're the nation that put men on the moon, that defeated communism and Nazism, that first took to the air. I'm not sure about that, but okay. Invented the assembly line and connected the world via the internet. Actually, that was Al Gore, but never mind. Are we perfect? No. Yes, when we were founded, slavery existed in our country as it did in most of the world. Whatever. And here we go. We atoned for that. We atoned for that with the blood of 600,000 Americans in a civil war. Alex! The only nation to fight such a war to end slavery. Well, that's partially because a lot of nations just kind of ended it without killing each other. But, okay, no, I'll come back to that. Yes, our government has done bad things in the past. In the past, not lately. Most notably, the internment of Americans during World War II because their ancestors came from Japan. Gee, thanks. Thanks for noticing. We are not perfect and do not claim to be. Yet there is a reason that we are the richest and freest nation on earth. We are proud of our country. Okay, and why? Oh, he didn't finish the thought. Now, anyway, so he closes up. Now, what part of this sounds even remotely like authoritarian dictatorship? How about all of it? God almighty. This is the screed of an SS man, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure he's a lovely family man. Rudolf Höss apparently had a gorgeous garden at Auschwitz. Lots of very, very nice people who church-going, give money to charities, wouldn't, hesitate to give you a ride if they were, of course, heavily armed enough to shoot you if you got out of hand. Lovely family people, all. Many of them. And sociopolitically, they're monsters. This guy is a monster. I call him a monster. Is this unfair? There are 50 million just like him, apparently. That's, by my calculation, a sixth of the, roughly, of the adult voting population in the United States. It's about what it took to turn Germany Nazi. And, you know, I think generally speaking, he's probably not one of the horripilation racists who, upon seeing an albedo too low off an integument, quails, runs under the bed, and has gastric symptoms. He's probably not that. He was in service. There's plenty of Aryan brothers in the service, but your average service person learns at worst a grudging tolerance for those unlike themselves, at least if they're Americans. I'm not sure I've met a single service person who developed any appreciation for Islamic culture while they were in theater during the most recent horrid adventures. But anyway, time grows short, and I yattered and screamed at this guy all the way through this, so just a few points along the way. You don't want authoritarian dictatorship, you say. God almighty, you want authoritarianism. I guess you want consensus authoritarianism, which we don't have now. We have sort of half and half authoritarianism. Half the country would like the other half to shut the hell up. And one half basically wants the half that's coming from the future to shut up. That's not going to work in the end, assuming there's a planet for us to argue on in the next 100 years, or at least a dry one. Yes, we mostly want to be left alone. I repeat, as I said earlier, if you live in the polis, you have politics. You can't be left alone. That's not how it works. You can be left alone up to a point. But beyond that, you have to have something to say about it if there will be any society at all. As Franklin said in the letter to Morris, check it out. Find the URL on the General Welfare Tendency Facebook page. If you don't pay your club, just go out and live in the woods. If you don't pay your dues for living in society, get out. And apparently it was the case that in colonial America, well, we don't pay any tax stuff. And this, mind you, when there was an acknowledged war debt of gigantic proportions compared to the GDP of the nascent nation. Yeah, people were like, why are you collecting money from us? It's my money. Franklin even points out, they said exactly that. It's my money. Then he explains what money is. You got to read that, really. Look it up. It's on the page. This will be better. This will be way better. There'll be like URLs and stuff on the screen and everything. You'll love it. It'll be great. I've guessed. We're going to try to get Osita Nwenevu. Yeah. That person. Anyway. And Charlie Pierce. I'm going to try to get Charlie Pierce. I'll Skype him. I'll do whatever I have to do. Let's go on. Let's see. We believe in free speech. By and large, I think most of what he says is unexaminedly hypocritical in the context of what conservatives are doing nowadays, but I'll give him a pass on most of it, except for the sententious business about the worst enemy of the lie is not the censor, it is the truth. Okay, whatever. Like I say, this guy obviously would like to get a newspaper syndication deal going someday. Good luck to you. Yeah, I can throw a rock in certain suburbs of Washington, hit a guy who can write like this, who will fall over and knock over 3 others. So, let's move on to the freedom of religion business. I don't know. He's obviously the kind of guy who just thinks it's fine that Baker Boy can just tell the LGBTQ folk to just go get their cake baked someplace else. A government and a judiciary that would ratify that is, if not authoritarian, certainly tribal, and tribalism leads to authoritarianism once you blow it up to the size of modern polity, or the arena of exercise, in any case. So, his business about, I'm not religious, but I'm Catholic, sort of plays once it gets to the sanctity of life story. And basically, I think he's incoherent because a bog standard American who has not been taught a scintilla of criticism of their own thought. You know, most conservatives are taught criticism of other people's thought. They can never quite see certain aspects of their thinking objectively. For instance, I've made this point, I'll make it more in later shows. Conservatism is a contentious notion. It starts with Burke, that forelock Tugger Burke, whom we love because he told the English that we were awesome. That's pretty much it. Looked at, he's closely, and Pache Connor Cruz O'Brien, there's nothing admirable in Burke except his prose style, which is fabulous and is frequently quite enough for a conservative. And I yield to no one in my admiration for an empty prose style of great verve. I like to fancy I have one. Okay, let's go on to free markets. We believe in free markets. Well, no markets are free, so that's crap right there. The government should stay out of the economy. Because the government stays out of the economy so much. Scott Pruitt's making sure that the government stays out of the economy so that toxic mine tailings can wash downstream to you. Yay, government staying out of stuff. Well, here's a fact. If there is government at all, it weights life in the social regime. It makes determinations. It's going to. Unless you get rid of the government and its power to acquire revenue for its own operation, unless you do that, there's going to be involvement in the economy. They're not very good at meddling in it. Well, are they not? I mean, meddle is a pretty loaded little participle there, but gerund, I suppose I should say. They're not. They're bad at meddling in it. Sometimes they're appallingly bad at meddling at it. The thing that's running the government at the moment, that sitting at the apex of the executive, he's terrible at it. He locks himself in rooms with authoritarian dictators without anyone else in the room and says what he will. Probably about a P-tape. I don't know. Allegedly. Let the market work itself out. No picking winners and losers. Blah, 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 blah. It's just nonsense. Capitalism is the best economic system ever devised. It's an economic system. Fernand Braudel once said that you could perfectly well have a market economy without capitalism. Letters of credit have existed in one form or another for 5,000 years. The formal things don't come into existence until the Hansa or some such, but there have always been mechanisms for advances and a little bit of something along the way. That's how it works. Capitalism, as we understand it, is not necessary to a market economy. So said Braudel, so say I. So sue me. God, it's not even worth going into it. The sanctity of life thing is just... incoherent as usual. I've said this before, I'll say it again. When they say life, they mean a mortal soul. It's a weasel word. Any reasonable human being should be able to recognize this. It's like, abortion, to me, it's a continuum. It's like point 0.0000000001% bad to cut short the career of a zygote. It's probably 99% bad to kill the plasm in the womb a week before conception for no reason whatever yourself, whether someone else does it and commits feticide or qualified infanticide. That's another criminal regime, but or it is a criminal regime. The other probably shouldn't be, even in the most extreme, at the most extreme bound of the thing. I don't know. In any case, it's interesting to me that he says that since we don't know, we should err on the side of not terminating the proto-human. Well, that's interesting, because we don't really know how much volition and how much precedent circumstances go into a human's striving and ability. We don't. We have no idea. We probably have less of an idea because, objectively speaking, at minimum, before the being in the womb has enough of a nervous system to feel pain, and then there's the question, even then, as even if it could feel pain, does it have an ego that can register it? I don't know. I don't even want to go there, although I will say this. I have some involved theological notions about this myself, and by and large they tend toward the old rabbinical mode, except maybe even a little further beyond that. Be that as it may, his abortion stuff is incoherent and completely incompatible with what he said about religion, but oh well, he got out of that by simply saying he's not really religious, and he has a beef with the Pope. I kind of like to know what that beef is, but anyway, individual responsibility. Curiously enough, that just ties to the thing I said. Do you really know why people do what they do? Do you know why one person wants to be a musician, one person wants to be a poet, one person wants to be a poet and musician but wouldn't mind teaching kids, one person just wants to teach kids but would kind of like to learn something about music but has some concerns inherited by the dismissive behavior of one of their parents? Whatever. Keeping and bearing arms. I got nothing to say about that. I think the state should have a monopoly on violence, and it should be a good state that doesn't exercise the monopoly capriciously, and certainly not on the basis of perceptions of a group's propensities to criminality or bad behavior. I don't know. The British Crown thing is a joke. It goes on and on. Free and fair elections, that's a joke. Strong defense. I think I really covered most of this. Anyway, what was the point of this? What was the point of this? Why did I subject you all to this? Just a reminder on the 4th of July that anyone of Pacific, social democratic, rationalist views with respect to government and society is up against a wall of trope. It's much easier to spew this junk than it is to sit and look at individual cases, try to understand their specificity in history now, the history that has informed them. You notice this 600,000 died and that atoned for slavery. Did it? Did it atone for slavery? What about that little detail about the failure of Reconstruction? What about the opportunity presented in 1965 that led to the success of the Southern Strategy in 1968? Was this a successful atonement? I don't think so. It's incoherent. It's sentimental. And yes, do conservatives actually want to live under an authoritarian dictatorship? No, they'd like to live under a tribal authoritarianism where the idols of the tribe, in Bacon's term, are the governing entities, that people do their proskynesis before just the things that have always been, like, because our fathers found it so. It won't do. I purpose to do what I can in the coming weeks, months, the rest of my life, whatever, doing this broadcast, webcast, whatever the hell it is, to try to get the social democratic view moving better in this republic. I can't do it by myself. What I do now may be of no import whatsoever. I hope as this goes on, there will be those of you who contact me, who give me your views. I will disregard the more moderate ones, but I will happily listen to them. Help us move out of this morass. Help us guide those of our citizens that are still capable of being guided, those who have given up hope or have no opinions for whatever reason, to a fuller sort of humanity through the agency of government as an expression of goodwill. I started off laughing at the good feelings of the Democratic Party, and to the extent that that's all they've got, I continue in my contumely to some degree, but I also understand that it's indispensable. All I'm saying, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So anyway, Alex, see you around. And we'll see you next week.